Thanks, Chris, and audio's going to blow everybody out of the room. So. I just wanted to share a few experiences since I'm certain that I'm the oldest CX something or other in the room. And just to broaden things out, Simon articulated a very clear view of what CTOs are. Though some of you in the room may be a little concerned that that doesn't quite fit you, but I can assure you that when you start putting these labels, VP Engineering, Chief Product Officer into the blender, you'll come up with lots of things that fill this role. So we're not hung up if your title isn't CTO. We're just trying to keep that focus on senior kind of strategic forward-looking things. And the reality is that many people wear two hats. And if you're in a startup, you know, you're probably coding as well. And I still have several friends who are in very large companies who still do lots of coding as CTOs. So I think if you can't read and smell code, you shouldn't be a CTO or an architect, particularly an architect. So, you know, please tell people if you're a post-technical architect, that doesn't really exist. So when people talk to me about business, they always talk, well, you know, I've been in a lot of businesses. I started pretty much as a director of a language and systems research systems group at a university, working on language and tools for teaching. Worked a lot with a company called Xerox, which used to make computer systems, and worked on the team building a lot of their programming languages and part of their operating system. Went back to university, did grad work in system computer engineering, promptly got hired as a professor by a dean. I paid my way through college basically by making sure that the business students didn't actually have to go and use calculators to do their assignments, and they could go skiing, and my colleague would run all their data through so they would have it so they could submit their assignments. And I paid my way through college doing that, and that got me very close to the senior dean of the business school, who called me into his office and said, "I hear you've been doing some things for our students." And I said, "Yes, yes, Professor Paquette." He said, "What do you think you could raise the price to?" And we developed a very great relationship. As I graduated in systems computer engineering, I ended up, he said, "Please come and fix our business school." Basically, now we have information systems in our business school, but it's completely broken. So just as I thought I was going to go off to do medical engineering or maybe work for a toy company, I ended up fixing a business school. I did twice, started a school of computer science, worked in 3 different faculties, and then decided, you know, should have a business, start a business doing retail point of sale systems. Found that extremely boring, and you know, working with retail customers is a really difficult problem. And you know, as a technical person, a lot of that requires you to be competent at sales, and I was barely competent. So I was eating but working to eat, which is never a good thing. So I worked for I started something called the Object-Oriented Research Group at the university. We started a few conferences, one called UPSLA, which is the object-oriented. So I'm basically became the Pied Piper of objects, and I sold, you know, Smalltalk and other object-oriented things to 10,000 or so people around the world, for which I apologize, because it was really a bad idea. But you know, most things that you think is a good idea at the time, later you confess. And I've been you know, pimping functional programming more recently, and that'll probably prove to be another bad idea. And I was a founding director of the Agile Alliance, so that's probably the worst idea of the things I worked on. So what I can share with you is experience. I can't necessarily, you know, and I think you learn a lot from failure, and so I've made most of the mistakes. And I then went off to basically do a company that built Smalltalk. Convinced my wife in the mid-90s, mid-80s really, that it would be a really good idea if I left my tenured professorship position, which was quite comfortable, and started a company building embedded systems with Smalltalk. In 1987, that was a difficult conversation with my wife, because it also meant that I went to the bank with the house that I paid off and mortgaged it to start the business. Since I'm a bootstrapper, I don't like VC, so every business I'm involved with, I actually bootstrap, and I believe that if you can't sell something before you get the money, you usually can't, which affects my latter attitude as an angel investor, which I reinforced when I was more foolish, when I had lots of money, by starting lots of startups, and learned once again that basically if you can't sell it beforehand. So when talking to business students, I always or to startups, I usually say, okay, what's the difference between a founder and an entrepreneur? And some people reply, but of course the answer is the entrepreneur can sell, and if you don't have one, you don't have a business, so just stop now. Right? There's lots of founders who usually end up as flounders, and I certainly did that in a couple of companies. So anyway, we started a company doing crazily embedded Smalltalk, and built Tektronix oscilloscopes, medical devices, and so on. Later on, I understood that was a revolutionary idea, and there was a language called Java 10 years later that actually did that, except it never shipped as a commercial platform, JNOS. And basically went on to sell that business to IBM, became a division of IBM called IBM Object Technology, and we unfortunately had to build Java, so we built the IBM JVMs, the Eclipse IDE. Again, I apologize for that. It was done in a hurry. Distributed development, Tom's going to tell you how to do it right. We had great teams, but trying to have 450 IBM engineers come to help you. We had 150 engineers when I sold it, and instead, because IBM's culture was so toxic, we actually kept a separate company that was IBM owned for 7 years, and we actually moved the IBM developers out into our locations. We had labs in 14 locations around the world at the time, including one in North Sydney. And we actually moved the IBM people in, detoxified them, and then reinfected them with our culture. And that was a very successful model. It is considered the most successful IBM acquisition, and generated billions of dollars for IBM, which is unfortunate because they didn't pay me that much. Then on did the Agile stuff, started involved with a company called Object Mentor. You may have heard Bob Martin, Michael Feathers, Dean Wampler, who's actually speaking. And after that, I went and did a company called Bedarra Research Labs, and that's the company that owns YOW. I've been an adjunct professor at a couple of universities, one over here and one over here, and also a NICTA fellow, all of which gave me an interesting observation to the state of education and research in Australia, which I'm not allowed to comment on in this thing. But university education and computing in Australia is an absolute disaster, and you should be very concerned if you're not already. And I came here 30 years ago to participate because of the great universities and many of the talented people in this room. And I am very concerned that you're not taking ownership and guiding your universities, and I hope that you can think about that. I was involved in a lot of conferences as an angel investor. I've been a director in 30+ international companies. I've sort of just keep doing startups, so I've done a few more. One in e-learning. I was involved in 5 companies in e-learning. This is a famous business lesson. If you like flowers, don't open a flower shop. Basically, you'll have beautiful flowers. The customers will come in and complicate you, and then they'll go down the hall and buy them from somebody else where they're cheaper. So I didn't make any money out of e-learning. I still have a passion for it, and maybe Coursera and so on will figure it out, but they haven't yet. And then I went back after doing a lot of large-scale agile transformations. I did Orbitz, IBM, Siemens, a bunch of large-scale organizations, and realized that I was going to need therapy along with the people that I was working with. So I went back to R&D, and I started a company Bedarra Research Labs, which is the research part. And that was supposed to be just a place for me to work with a small group of people that we enjoyed ourselves, and we were supposed to do R&D projects and not build a product. Unfortunately, I hired my son. He built something he declared to be a product, even though it wasn't a solution. And I panicked. My wife panicked even more because she said, "You're supposed to stop doing this." I mean, I'm a very old man at this point. So I fortunately found a company fairly quickly and sold it before we started marketing the product, which is well, we sold it to some beta customers, and fortunately we did that. So I now work for this company, KX Systems now, which is a public company. We have about 2,500 employees globally. We do everything in vector functional programming, so I'm still at the lunatic fringe or off someplace. I don't understand why people have to use these really bad programming languages, but people just do and inflict them on themselves. So I'm still very technical, but I'm reaching the end of the line. So that's about me. Just to go back, people get called all sorts of things, so don't take CTO as being a title. In some places, CTO means, in many large companies, we really like you for your leadership, you're really strong, you were a founder, all these things, and what we found is a nice little place to park you over here. The other thing is that CTOs have to think forward. And so I'm a chief scientist now, and that's even more useless than a CTO. Would you like to meet our scientist, right? I have a lab coat, but I don't wear that in Australia because Nigel wears a lab coat, if you know Nigel Dalton. And so we try and figure out, and so often even when you start out well, if you're planning the future, it's really easy to do the strategy of the future. I did this for IBM. I've done it for lots of companies, worked on the strategy, worked on it for Xerox, for Honeywell, Northern Telecom. And basically, it's very easy if all you have to work on is a strategy and a plan to get 5 to 10 years ahead of the company, right? And 5-year plans don't even work for the Soviet Union. So, and generally, once I do that, I quit because I said, well, here's, I've done, here's, it's 8 years of strategy. You're not going to execute any of it because the VP of engineering doesn't have enough resources or doesn't want to do it or whatever it is. And so you get stuck. So I think it's ideal the more, I'm a big fan of what I call the playing coach model. So and since I'm a Canadian, this means basically if you're going to coach a hockey team, you don't actually have a book, a process book that tells you how to play hockey. You actually have to know how to put on a pair of skates and actually how to skate and be able to shoot the goal and still walk out, get on the ice with the team and do that. So I advocate, in all roles, particularly architects, that, they need to be able to smell and read code, right? And code does smell. If you can't smell the software burning in an organization within 2 hours of walking through a company, then you probably are become detached from the reality. So very, very important. Some places, the people who really do the CTO role are a team of principal engineers or distinguished engineers. One of the things I worked on was creating the distinguished engineer designation at IBM and also at ACM. This is to recognize senior leadership. This is so-called technical ladder. So technical ladders are very important, and one of the things you should try and do as a CTO is to encourage that there's some way to get to that technical ladder. I mean, my sort of infamous letter at IBM says there are no rungs on the ladder between chief technical scientist, or whatever they call it, a senior technical, STSM, I don't remember what it stands for exactly. It's another one of those IBM acronyms. And chief scientist. And literally there was no way to do anything above that. There were just empty rungs. And most software companies in the United States and many around the world now have either distinguished engineer or principal engineer, so you can have really senior people. And this is a way to essentially have many CTOs as opposed to one, because the world's very complicated. Allows a bit more specialization in the CTO ranks. So if you're growing, I encourage you to sort of not necessarily. The other issue is, the only job you have as an executive in a company is to figure out how to replace yourself. The best thing you can do is sell your job, right? You're a real success if you can sell your job, because there's always more work and other things you can do, whether you move laterally or you move up in more areas or you change completely to a different role in a different company. So really look for doing that. It's important, and I think obvious to state that leadership really matters, and it's not articulated well enough, right? The fact that you have to have time to listen, you have to have integrity, you have to lead by example, you have to execute with transparency, you have to have wisdom, you have to articulate the vision, because people look to you to basically tell the story. Many people, if you've heard of the XP book, there's a metaphor. The metaphor is really the vision, the really big thing. The fact is, most people who really build serious products, competitive products, don't have a big plan. What they've got is kind of the really big story, the metaphor. Here's where we're going, that sharing, and that's the key thing you have to do. You have to share with them the vision in a simple way. When we built IBM's Visual Age and Eclipse, particularly when we did IBM Java, basically was very simple. You had to explain to people, what are we doing? We have people, 400 people, way many of them were needed, but that's IBM. Congratulations, you have 150 good engineers. What we want to do is give you, another 300 of ours, right? And they're distributed all over the world and full of politics. So how do you get these people motivated? Basically say, okay, we're already a year behind Sun Microsystems or more. We're getting completely screwed by the licensing agreements. This game still continues. If you're around at YOW, you may say there'll be a person from Oracle talking, but the same Java's open. It's not really. Game continues with more sophistication. So there's a whole political business agenda. You don't have that many people who even know Java. Our team was crack Smalltalk VM builders. There were very few people in IBM who knew what Java was. There weren't many people in the world who knew what Java 1 was, right? And so your mission is to build a virtual machine and an IDE, which is competitive with the owner of the technology, and do that in under a year, and deliver it at fixed price on time. Now, if you tell everybody that, first off, they get scared and run away, especially any management types, because especially in IBM, because everyone's guaranteed that they're going to make their goal and get their bonus. Right? So instead, we basically said, look, we're already late, we're way behind. There's a bunch of smart guys in California. How are we going to approach this? And I said, well, first of all, there's a very simple rule. We're not going to take on Sun out of the box, and we're not going to take on J++. That went away with a legal agreement between Sun and Microsoft. Rather, we're just going to say, we're going to take out the smallest guy that's ahead of us. And there was a company called Semantic, and we said, we're going to make Semantic disappear, right? Then we're going to take, since we have a background of building IDEs from Smalltalk, we're going to make an IDE for Java that's like, has the interactivity of Smalltalk. We'll call that Visual Age for Java. And we're going to make that better than anybody else has in the market. Unfortunately, we were only competing against, I can't even remember the name of the company now that builds it. It's built in Eastern Europe. That Sun had a product for doing it. Some of you remember it. This is back in history now. And then we're going to actually, we'll keep doing this. So we'll just take out the next largest guy and keep building and do this. And the other big thing is we basically said we're not telling anybody what we're doing. Because one of the worst things you can do is if you're building in a competitive environment is basically go out and tell everybody, look, we're building the greatest Java that you ever think. You want to jinx your product. Start having your engineers tell everybody about it ahead of time, right? There's so many things that will go wrong. What you have to do is shut up and ship, right? We have a rule that basically shut up and ship. Those people who ship, they get to speak. So you can celebrate, when you have the code out there in the customer's hands, you can talk about it, you can go public, but do not get carried away going out speaking, because your engineer, people, you're talking at a conference and they say, oh, are you going to do, are you going to run in Kubernetes? And you're not even near going in Kubernetes, right? We have that situation in another product I'll tell you, but won't tell you about. And of course the engineers come back and say, well, they said we're going to be running. So of course I told them, yeah, we'll run in Kubernetes. So you just get all this feature creep and pressure on your team. So again, by keeping it simple and focusing, you can do these things. People, of course, are the heart of this. I think the most thing, the famous quote that I use is, hire them young, they don't know it can't be done. That's a quote by Seymour Cray, and it's worked for me. In general, in Canada, we have a co-op education program, which means you get students for 4 months or 8 months. They get paid and they go back to school. It's a really great program. We've hired all the employees for really 4 businesses over 30 years from that process. Google and Microsoft are big employers for the same program. It's very, very effective. Make sure that people can speak and write in additional coding. Focus on diversity, both in terms of the technical diversity, that is that they understand different technology, as well as the human social diversity in terms of geography, religion, culture, and of course, gender. This is very, very important. If you want to see big examples of failures, look at Microsoft and Google. People only hire people through puzzles, hire really bright people who are a complete pain in the ass when they get promoted up the ladder, right? The kinds of bickering and nonsense that goes on inside of Google and Microsoft when you try and move these people up, because they're all the same. And so it's very, very hard to build consensus and sharing and so on. And almost all the successful products that I've been involved with, in the customer at least, if not in our organization, the hard decisions were made through female leadership. For some reason, they didn't have to worry about being right. They focused more on how to get the best wrong answer. And that's something I think that's very, very important with a CTO. There is no right answer. And often when you have 2 technical teams or business teams coming to you, and in the end, your job is to make decisions. That's basically what a C-level executive is supposed to do: provide leadership and make decisions, which really means figuring out what you're not going to do. Right? That's the only hard thing in a business. What are we not going to do? And the big challenge is, many times when you have new proposals and new strategies for doing this and new products, there's a big ceremony where we've picked the winner. Right? What you haven't done is pick the winner. What you've done is declare the losers. And in very few cases are there major decisions. Like, we have a decision that we all have to adopt some kind of computer because we have to buy workstations or whatever it is for all the engineering teams. Or we have to decide what, God forbid, programming language we're going to use, right? It's purely unemotional topic. Or whether we should use this architecture or that architecture and so on. And really strong, bright people put their life and blood into bringing forward their cases. And the biggest challenge I found, and I think I'll leave you with, is that it's very important to allow those people to articulate their views, to celebrate their good points in their presentations, and then to acknowledge that as you, the responsible party, have had to come up with the best wrong answer. Because there is no right answer, and by making that decision, you need to strongly embrace that, there were so many good things in this proposal. I mean, if they're terrible, it's okay, you need to be honest, but usually there are lots of good arguments on both sides. And in the end, it just comes down to a judgment call. I don't want to say it's a coin toss, but sometimes it's pretty close. And you as the CTO or the CTO, VP of engineering, and the CEO, you're just going to try and go through that. And you're going to have to say, okay, look, this is what we're going to do, but we want to try and get the best parts from these other things over here. So there's, too often, the other big thing is that the one word that's helped me in transformations throughout organizations is I use the word work with. So when people introduce themselves, you know, they don't come along and say, oh, you know, this is Dave Thomas, he's the, you know, chief poobah of whatever it is. They basically say, I'm Dave Thomas, you know, I work with Tom, I work with Chris, you know, I work with Joanne, you know. And work with is a very simple idea. And it's very, very important that you stress this throughout, and you always talk to this, and that you basically walk around. The power of management by walking the floor is very, very important. I worked in many companies. I did a major restructure for Cognos. You may have heard of them. And my biggest success there was actually getting the executive, senior executive for products to actually get off the elevator between the top floor of the building where the executives were and actually go and look where teams had sort of decorated their cubes like hockey teams, you know, to support their favorite hockey team for a charitable event. And he'd never been seen on that floor. So thanks for your time, a little bit of sharing.